Eric Kelsey had seen the painting of Sonja 3 times before he realized he knew her. A young woman with short dark hair, sitting in a cafe, a long cigarette holder in her right hand, a pack of Camels and a lipstick tube on the table. Painted by a guy named Christian Schad in 1928 in Germany during the Weimar Republic after World War I, when anything went. Life was absurd. How else to explain what had just happened? 20 million dead. Schad wanted to show the new world emerging from the wreckage, so he painted 2 portraits of the so-called New Woman. The first he called Lotte, the second, Sonja. Did it mean anything to Eric, this painting of Sonja? Did it move him in any way before he knew?
It did, in the historical sense, that it was, this was a picture, a painting of the independent woman of the 1920s. Other than that, it was just a beautiful painting. It was not one that I was overly attracted to. Nothing that I would sit there and feel a lift from.
Eric is a writer and journalist in his early 40s. He went to Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, and worked in Minneapolis for a time, mostly as a business reporter. Then he moved to Berlin, where he wrote for Reuters and Der Spiegel's English-language website. He's been in Los Angeles now for the past 15 years. And these days, having covered Hollywood and sports, junkets with George Clooney and Lindsay Lohan, he's writing mostly about his family. Which is how, a few years ago, he realized who Sonja really is.
My relation to Albertine Gimpel is she is the cousin to my great-grandfather. I have looked it up a few times on what actual relation that is, if it's either first cousin thrice removed, first cousin twice removed, and then you try to check it on AI and they get confused as well. So you get different answers. So the easiest way to say is she was a first cousin to my great-grandfather.
32 years old when she was painted in Berlin, single and Jewish. 5 years before the Nazis took over.
I'd been thinking about what you had asked. And I know, I had said, on the most basic level, it's thrilling. And that I'd grown up knowing very little about my family, just the broad contours of my grandparents' history and what they endured. And later on, I had found an old family tree my grandfather had kept, and it covers about 4 generations. Several died young before the Holocaust, some survived, many died in the camps, and I had always wanted to understand these people as they were, more than just names on transport lists and bureaucratic forms. This history here had always seemed unknowable until I landed on Albertina. Discovering her as Sonja felt like the thrill an archaeologist must feel uncovering a lost city and then finding an ancestor buried inside.
This is the Object Podcast, produced by the Minneapolis Institute of Art, now showing modern art and politics in Germany, 1910 to 1945, featuring 4 decades of art that traces the course of the German experience, from the experimental 1920s to the art bans of the Nazi era. The Object is made possible by generous support from Ameriprise Financial, a proud supporter of the Minneapolis Institute of Art and committed to the future of art and culture in the communities they serve. Ameriprise Financial, helping people feel confident about their financial future since 1894. Today, a story of family, and how the small, intimate stories of family are also the grand stories of history, Who gets to tell these stories, especially when you didn't realize they were yours to tell? I'm Tim Gihring. Albertina never knows her father, a man named Albert, who dies in the fall of 1895, 7 months before she's born, in March 1896, in the town of Schwerin in northern Germany. Albertina's mother, Johanna, moves the family to Berlin, and there her sister Elsa dies at 16, and her sister Margareta at 22, and her brother Julius at 26. And by then, in 1914, the war has begun. Before it ends in 1918, her mother dies too. Albertina is alone.
We do know from her own statements that when her mother died in 1918, summer of 1918, she left Albertina a sizable inheritance, including a 5-room apartment and a nice upper-middle-class section of Berlin. So we know there was money to support them. We don't know exactly where it came from, but we do know that when she was on her own, that she had financial support behind her.
Albertina goes to school through the 10th grade and then takes a secretarial business class. Soon she's a secretary in an office at various small companies, then a trade association, until she gets a job at Olex, the national oil company. A lucky thing, since by 1923, her inheritance is gone.
1923, that's the big hyperinflation. All her cash is worthless.
She isn't making a lot at Olex, maybe $45,000 or $50,000 in today's money, but it's enough, and it's interesting work. The company is building Germany's first network of gas stations around the country, and Albertina is there to help. At the same time, she's traveling to Italy for a while and then to France for several months. The new woman on her own, if not exactly alone.
So we don't know if she's supporting herself in these travels, which is highly unlikely. It allows the imagination to run wild. What a young woman without many attachments to family, can be doing in the golden 20s of Weimar Berlin. I think it would be safe to say that she likely was traveling with a paramour.
Albertina comes to know a well-off journalist and scientist who is part of the intellectual scene in Berlin. A man who introduces her to Christian Schad, the artist. Schad is indeed something of a scenester, cool and detached, louche even, a dabbler. Part of the Dada movement at first, and then the new objectivity. For a while he makes photographs without a camera, arranging interesting objects on photo paper in interesting ways, and then exposing them. Shadographs, he calls them. At some point, he becomes interested in the idea of the new woman, probably because he's meeting a lot of them in the cabarets and cafes where he's hanging out. Independent, fashionable women, like Albertina Gimpel.
We do know from people that knew her that she was a stylish woman. She liked to, dress well. She's quite tall. She's almost 5'8". Everyone describes her as good-looking, tall, and skinny, with an air of refinement. She was the type of person that liked to hang out in bars and restaurants and cafes with a certain crowd, meaning artists. She was interested in artists. She knew where to go to meet them.
Schad calls his painting of her Sonja for reasons no one seems to have documented. And then Albertina goes back to work. At 32, still on her own.
I'm always aware of the irony that she was a new woman. She could vote. She could work. She was independent, but that independence was foisted upon her all at the same time. So her independence was born not from choice, but out of necessity.
In January 1933, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis take over Germany. And 4 months later, on April 30, Albertina loses the one thing she can't afford to lose, her job. "We are forced to let you go," her termination letter says, "due to the changing economic and political landscape." But privately, she's told, it's because of the quote-unquote atrocity stories that the Nazis say the Jews are feeding to the foreign press. Lies, they say.
And so as a punishment of these lies, you are now being fired for being Jewish. So, yeah, it was a very kind of cruel and twisted way to be fired as a rationale, and it was completely appropriate to the language and personality of the government.
Well, have typewriter, will travel. So Albertina takes her typewriter and moves to Munich. She finds work here and there, but her income declines substantially. She's making a third of what she used to. An independent woman, but barely. Let's jump back for a minute to the late 1800s in New York, where Franz Herder is growing up, the son of German parents in Brooklyn. When Franz is 2, his mother dies of pneumonia, and eventually his father remarries, and the small family moves back to Germany. Franz studies to be a painter, and he becomes one, but in some ways, it's the least interesting thing about him. He volunteers in World War I, flying planes for the German side, even though he holds an American passport. He's shot down, spends a year and a half in a hospital.
He almost was somebody who sought out danger, you could say. He had quite a bit of chutzpah.
Franz always drives a sports car, a convertible if he can get one. There's a story about him driving to the Italian border, being denied entry, and driving through anyway. He is not one to take 9 for an answer.
Some people describe him as almost being respectless, without respect to any sort of manners. It wasn't that he was rude, but that he didn't really grease the wheels of diplomacy, so to speak. So you get all these varied descriptions of him, but one thing is that people loved him. He was magnetic.
Franz meets Albertina at a party in 1936, playing bridge. By then, Franz has a reputation as someone who hates Nazis and is eager and able to help Jews. There's a story of Franz coming across a Jewish man with a young blonde woman in Munich, and a Nazi thug harassing them, a crowd circling around. Franz takes the couple by the arms. "Hey, I've been looking for you. Where have you been?" and walks off with them. There's another story about a Jewish man sent to a camp for telling an anti-Nazi joke, and Franz walks into a government office and says, "Hey, this is a very popular joke among the high-ranking officials in Berlin. I know. I can give you the names of people who enjoy these jokes." And the guy's let out. It doesn't hurt that he still has an American passport.
And so if he would get harassed by the security apparatus, the SA, he would just take out his American passport and he would leave him be. He also, as a charismatic man who had friends everywhere, he knew people high up. He knew who they were. So he was able to really twist the arm of these bureaucrats and create these stories. And he knew enough people and about enough people of power that he would come off credible.
Supposedly, Franz even met Hitler once in the studio of Hitler's favorite sculptor, Ferdinand Liebermann, in Munich.
Hitler came in to look at the progress on the bust of his niece, who he was quite fond of and affectionate towards, and Franz was in the atelier. And Franz told him in no uncertain terms that your ideology will be the ruin of Germany and I can't stand its anti-Semitism. And they, apparently got in some argument, and he said, I'm never going to join your party. Don't even think about it.
Maybe it's just a legend. But Franz, by 1936, is actually something of a legend himself, right? So Albertina seeks him out and asks him, when the time comes, will you help me?
He was someone that almost would never say no to helping somebody else, particularly on something that he felt was morally wrong. A lot of people describe him as somebody having, an unshakable moral center, and he wouldn't let go of that.
The time comes in 1941. Albertina is basically in forced labor already, sorting lotto tickets in a printing house for very little money, living in the Jewish ghetto in Munich, where Jews have been compelled to live so they're easier to round up. And one day, she's told to get on a bus.
Herta shows up, talks to the security agent there, says she's been struck from the list. And he says, how is she struck from the list? He said, this person, he named somebody high up in the security apparatus. He's taken her off the list. So she's saved.
On May 13, 1943, she's told to pack again. She calls Franz that night. Meet me at so-and-so park, he says, at 6 a.m. And this time, when they meet, Franz says, look, I'm already hiding someone in my apartment. The Gestapo is starting to ask around. So he takes her to the home of a fellow artist, Edward Winkler.
She basically stays in a closet, a small room, and rarely comes out. And that's the beginning of her journey living illegally, going underground.
It's hard not being independent, relying on others just to stay alive. And it's wartime. The Winklers have lost a son at the front.
So there was quite a bit of grief and stress within the house. It was exerting itself quite a bit on Mrs. Winkler, and that then in turn exerted itself onto Albertina. She felt enormous amounts of guilt.
Getting enough to eat was hard enough during the 30s, the Depression. Now everyone has ration cards, except, of course, people in hiding. The Winklers have to share with Albertina as much as she lets them.
And so she also started suffering from quite a bit of medical ailments at that time as well, mostly due to her anxiety and malnutrition.
Franz and some others managed to scrounge extra ration cards, share some food with Albertina. But eventually, Franz becomes concerned enough to move her in with him, even if there is another man there. Besides, they may be, falling in love.
And it's unclear when that relationship started. That's a question I've yet to figure out when it turned romantic.
It does, though, at some point. And not long after Albertina moves in with him, they have a big decision to make. The Allies are bombing Munich. Franz and Albertina can't leave the apartment, can't even go to the basement or risk exposure. So they stay upstairs, bombs falling all around them. Until finally, the bombs hit. Franz's apartment is gone, obliterated. And because the apartment is also Franz's studio, all his paintings are also gone. But somehow, he and Albertina are not. Now, there's a guy Franz knows. There's always a guy. In this case, a writer named Friedrich Reck. Friedrich is not an aristocrat, but fancies himself one. So he is Friedrich Reck Melechsaven, having put his place name at the end of his own name by the time that Franz and Albertina show up at his country estate. Friedrich is no fan of democracy, but he is also no Nazi. He has come to the country, after all, to write what he calls the Diary of a Man in Despair, about life under Hitler.
Reck Melechsaven was already under suspicion from the Gestapo for his anti-Hitler views. So, he is hiding his diary throughout, burying it in the yard. A portion of it that was hidden in the barn ends up getting eaten by mice. It was still quite a bit of stress, even though they were out in the country. And the Gestapo would come and visit.
When a car pulls up in the driveway, Albertina runs to the forest to hide. This, too, takes a toll. The worry that, once again, she's endangering others just by existing.
She at many times wanted to just end it all and turn herself in.
Sometimes Albertina goes to town just to be around people, though it could literally be the death of her.
You don't know, what this came from. Was she trying to be caught? Was it, the thought, I just need to be around people, and if I'm going to be caught, so be it. It's one hell versus another to live in. But I think you could accurately say that it took an entire village to save her.
At the end of 1944, Friedrich is arrested. He's taken to Dachau, the concentration camp north of Munich. And just a few months before the end of the war, in May 1945, he's dead. Germany is rubble now. Albertina is full of guilt, sick, isolated. At one point, she fills out a form about where she would like to go.
They ask, do you have any family remaining? She says, none. All are dead or murdered. Another question, where is your family? She knows. She says, died in Theresienstadt or Poland.
Albertina and Franz get married, and after a while, with his American passport, they move to New York. Franz paints. In fact, he paints one of the only portraits of Albert Einstein after meeting him at Princeton. And then, in the early 1960s, they move back to Germany. There are, in fact, still relatives around, friends who remember Franz as the life of every party.
They had an ironic sense of humor with each other. Whenever he would get frustrated or something, he would throw up his hands and ironically say, never again will I save you. He said it very kindly and friendly, but that was always a punctuation mark that he would like to use.
Albertina, they remember as elegant, always with the short hair. If reserved, stingy even, afraid of running out. During the war, she had been treated by a doctor, essentially for anxiety, with a placebo, sugar pills. And at the end, it is the same doctor who helps her with the same prescription, a little sugar to help life go down. But she never feels sorry for herself, apparently. Not anymore. Not about getting old, not about no longer being the person she was before the war. Sonja. In 1969, after Franz has died, And toward the end of her life, Albertina meets Christian Schad again, and his wife.
He describes her and their meeting in 1969 as a beautiful, skinny, tall, refined woman with a touch of melancholy after the death of her husband.
Schad had joined the Nazi Party in the 30s, likely just to keep working, not because he shared their values. In any case, he had held on to the painting all through the war. And then in 1997, it's acquired by the Neue National Gallery in Berlin, and has been on view almost continually ever since, an emblem of an era. Eric feels differently about the painting now, of course. It's family. And family is always complicated.
You have to say there's the simple delight of seeing yourself in the mirror. It is a peculiar feeling to have this painting also evocative of kind of what was lost and what was also saved. That you don't have any real knowledge of your family or many people.
What do we really know about anyone, he says. Sonja, Albertina. A life becomes a story. A story that can be told different ways. And who gets to tell it?
Whether we're saved for posterity in a brilliant artwork that just by chance is now hanging in one of the foremost institutions in the world, it's also a reminder that, the past is a bit out of your control at the same time. Our stories are meaning shifts. We don't really have control over what the future will do to us. It's interesting because it does show how stories are out of your control. You feel like you have a stake in your own family, but when part of that story or the door into that story is also in the public, you no longer own it yourself. It's part of something larger that you have to share.
This has been the Object Podcast, made possible with the generous support of Ameriprise Financial. Get tickets now for Modern Art and Politics, about the German experience in art during the 1910s, 20s, 30s, and 40s at the tickets page of the Minneapolis Institute of Art's website, artsmia.org. I'm Tim Gihring, and thanks very much for listening.